Brittany, you want to start recording the thing? Yep. Welcome to the February 24th WDIC meeting. And next I want to, well, everyone knows each other, I believe, so we don't need to do introductions. Why don't we go into any, I'm going to change the agenda, any changes to the agenda? I know that human resources may be a little bit late, so I'm going to probably change that on the agenda, and also change announcements to at the end of the meeting. Do we have any public comment, Kathy?
No, Henry, we don't.
Okay. Then why don't we look at the minutes for the January 27th, 2021 meeting. I entertain a motion to, Anne, are you moving?
Yes.
Okay. Moved by Ann Coleman. Can I get a second? Second by Rachel Graham. Any discussion? Okay. Let's just do by hand raising votes. Everybody who wishes to vote in the positive for the support of the minutes. Okay. That includes me too. It's a unanimous vote. Then why don't we dive into the chair's report. I don't have a very long chair's report because we have a very long meeting today. I just want to thank everyone for being on the committee and showing up today. I also just want to thank my predecessors, Elizabeth Claiborne and Ann Coleman, for being prior chairs of this committee. Leslie for a number of years, and she started the committee. I just hope I can fill the big shoes that are left. So right now, why don't we move on to our first sort of committee, Office of Human Rights. Reverend Clark, if you can give us a report from your office.
Sure. I'm going to talk about a couple of things. One regarding our inquiries from 2020 vis-a-vis or in relation to 2019, and plans to work with the Human Rights Commission to address that. And then I'll talk about a couple of our programming initiatives we've been involved in, and one coming up tomorrow, and the other one just recently completed. We, as I think has been discussed in this space previously, we've seen a drop in our inquiries over the last year. The drop in inquiries actually began even prior to the pandemic in January and February. Typically, we had been averaging anywhere between 75 to over 100 inquiries a month. And over, let's say over 2019. I was not here in 1919. I guess none of the rest of us were either, but we have been averaging 75 to 100 inquiries a month. But we found in looking at our January through March figures, we had 76 in January, 45 in March, and in the 70s, 70 in the 70s in March, 45 in February. But I'm going to do a sort of comparison. I'm going to try to do a share screen here just to let you see the change over the 2-year period of 2019-2020. Let's see. Okay, so this is 2019. Are you all able to see the entire screen, the entire sheet? You're not, okay. So I'll scroll down. So this looks at subject matter about which people were calling. The second category are protected classes, those classes that are protected by New York State human rights law. And then there are other categories as well. And so for 2019, the total of inquiries was 895. I'm going to now put up the 2020 figures. Let's see. Okay. So here are the 2020 figures, and you can already see the difference in those figures compared to what you just saw. And so, I mean, more than half of our inquiries in 20, I mean, we had less than half of the number of inquiries we had a year before. And so I have been in conversation with the Human Rights Commission as recently as our meeting earlier this month, to begin to work with them to develop a publicity campaign. This would, at least in my initial conception of this publicity campaign, it would be comprised of public service announcements, running announcements on Pegasus Channel 13, radio spots, and in social media to promote the idea, to promote that the office is indeed all open and taking inquiries. And while we are not meeting with people in person, we can meet with people by phone, by Zoom, if people have that technology, and other means to address their concerns in the effort to really try to address this sort of decline in inquiries to the office, which in large measure I would attribute to the pandemic. And also the pandemic has also impacted the capacity for people to walk in. I mean, people, historically would just stop by the office. They were nearby, they had concerns, they were in the vicinity and could do that. And we're not able to accommodate walk-ins at this time. So those factors, I think, played a role in the decline in our numbers. So we are going to make an effort to boost them. The commission right now is in process of recruiting new members. We've had several of the original 15 members that reconstituted the commission 2 years ago had to resign, and in one case, in Kirby Edmonds' case, Kirby passed away. And so we are filling some vacancies on the commission, in which will help us to move forward. Because in fact, one of the people who left was our former communications committee chair, and along with her, another one of her members of that particular committee left. And so we're sort of in the process of reconstituting ourselves in terms of those vacancies. So that's our plan going forward with that. On tomorrow, I hope you will be able to join us when we host our monthly event, which also is a Black History Month event, called African Americans, the Death Gap in Health Equity, One Doctor's Perspective. And that is featuring Dr. David Ansel, who is a vice president at Rush University Medical Center in Chicago, who's worked for over 4 decades in Chicago with Black and Brown communities. And he's written this book called The Death Gap, How Inequality Kills, in which he addresses the ways in which that racism and other forms of injustice, what he calls structural violence, the ways in which structure, those structures in which people operate, or the ways in which people's lives are structured. As my ethics professor in seminary say, structure relationships. And the ways in which that structural violence takes place, that is a social, that racism and other forms of injustice are social determinants of health. And so Dr. Ansel is going to be talking about this, and we'll be taking questions and answers on tomorrow at 12 noon. This program can be viewed on the county's YouTube channel. And we're looking forward to tomorrow's event. Last week, we ended what was a very successful, in my view, and I think in the view of participants, workforce WDIC reading and discussion group, which was centered around Ibram X. Kendi's book, How to Be an Anti-Racist. Belisa Gonzalez did a great job in facilitating our discussion, and we had just great participation from the 20 folks who signed up for the event, and it went extremely well. We were able to reach full capacity in terms of registration. We had 20 openings, and all 20 of those openings were filled. And I think that it helped our county colleagues to equip them to carry on the work of creating or in developing equitable spaces in their work environments, and in doing that in ways that are appropriate to their work and their positions. And so I thought it went extremely well. And so we're looking forward to next year's event or reading and discussion group that may occur later this year as well. So that is my report, and I will take any questions, comments.
Okay, can you stop sharing your screen? Thank you.
Yep.
Any questions to Reverend Clark? Anne?
Thanks, Dr. Clark, for your report. I'm looking forward to the presentation tomorrow, so I'm glad you're doing that. So one question I had: did you have any anecdotal or any more information on the reading program that you had? Maybe personal insights that people have gained, just anything personal. Oh, well, I don't mean personal, but any snippets you can share.
Oh, well, what I could do, I could defer to my colleague Rachel Graham, who was one of the members in the group, and Deanna. I think they can speak to their impressions if they'd be willing to.
Okay, Rachel.
Of the reading and discussion? Sorry, was there a specific question? My daughter was talking to me while Anne was asking her question.
Oh,
I was just wondering if there was any other, snippets of personal impressions that people had from the reading discussion group that that you felt comfortable in sharing.
I mean, I think it went really well. There was really great participation, a lot of great discussion between all of the participants. I think there might have been a couple that couldn't use audio for some reason, but we were able to communicate pretty well through the chat for those ones. And we might have some people that either weren't fully aware about Jedi or just are more interested in getting involved with that work also, just from doing the group and hearing more about that.
So some of the notes, okay, go ahead.
Good, Deanna.
Oh, just sure. And some of the notes that I took were just one, it was a great job by Dr. Clark and Dr. Gonzalez. It was very informative, and it was just nice to be in a learning space with folks, and it was a very interactive session, and everybody was sad to see it end. So that speaks to the quality of the job that was done there. Some of the notes that I said specifically were just around, I had sent a note because I couldn't attend the last one, which is saying my learning points from it were the complexity of anti-racist work can be overwhelming, but we must create opportunities to continuously lay the foundation for ongoing personal growth. That spoke to, we had various folks who grappled with the term of anti-racism, disagreed with the term of anti-racism, didn't see anti-racism as an actual issue, various things. And so meeting people where they are in terms of their path and journey, but then also talked about shifting the term from safe spaces to brave spaces and how we encourage people to speak up. And then also one of the other takeaways was one of the things we talked about was sharing incomplete thoughts. A lot of folks will preface their conversation saying, I'm not sure if I'm okay, or hopefully this doesn't sound stupid, but also just empowering folks to share incomplete thoughts. I thought was a really good takeaway from that, but then also continue to be mindful of other people's journey. And the last thing was the learning and development process is an interactive experience and everyone has a role. So it was great, but those are just me from a learning perspective in my role, trying to think about how we can continue to move the movement forward. So I thought it was great. So those were my takeaways.
Yeah, and I would echo and reinforce what Deanna and Rachel said. And it reinforced for me just the ongoing work of anti-racism. There's not an arrival point. This is a process. It's a continuum. It is something that we all can work on and continue to work on. And you don't have to have it all together, either in terms of an intellectual understanding of racism or an experiential or existential experience of it. But that, there is room for, there's space for growth and for, I would say, grace, and for an opportunity to learn from others and learn from experience. And so it sort of reinforced things that I already knew in that regard, but it gave me some additional handles in terms of the reading, but also to the way in which the ground rules that Belisa laid for us that Deanna just cited. I think were really instrumental.
Okay, Larry?
The makeup of the group that was there, were there people representing all levels of the organization, of the county workforce?
It's a pretty wide spectrum of folks from different offices in the county. I could look at the registration info in terms of giving you a little bit more specifics, but I thought it was a pretty good cross section of county employees, and it was a diverse group as well.
Good. Because part of what we're doing with this is helping people at all levels of the county workforce to get comfortable having these kinds of conversations. Mm-hmm. So not just upper level management or frontline workers, but combinations of all of the different layers in the hierarchy of the county.
Mm-hmm. And that was indeed the case, Larry. It was a spectrum. It was not just senior level folks. They were people of various types of staff and levels of work or gradations of work.
Okay. Any other questions for Reverend Clark? I just have two questions. In terms of your marketing plan to promote the office, have you thought about using emails, and have you talked to Dominic about using emails to get your message out?
I have not, but I certainly can do that. And certainly would work with him, and he would be integral to anything that we do in terms of marketing. I had not, thought in specific terms in terms of what I would ask him to do, but certainly he would be in the loop on this process.
Okay. I was also wondering, do you think that since the anti-racism book group went so well, do you think it might be time for a standalone session on anti-racism?
Oh, absolutely. That could very much, that's a real possibility in terms of our future programming. Now, I've actually considered, I just have not determined what to call it yet, but or what the focal point of it would be. But I have thought about doing that sometime later in the year.
Okay.
Related to that, in similar theme of standalone sessions on anti-racism and so on, I'd be interested, as this committee, exploring the possibility of doing sessions on anti-racism in collaboration with other businesses and organizations within the community. Just for example, place where I work, we're aggressively working on anti-racist strategies internal to our organization. And while all of us are going to be idiosyncratic and so forth, I think to whatever extent the county coordinated through WDIC can help bridge the efforts throughout the community, we'll all be stronger.
Sure. And I'm receptive to that conversation, Rob, in terms of future events.
Okay. Yeah, isn't it also that that executive alliance or whatever that got together that you were part of, Reverend Clark?
Executive Exchange.
Executive
Or
Exchange.
XX as it's called.
Right. And so that could also be a working group that you could use to maybe talk about anti-racism in the world in Ithaca, Tompkins County.
Absolutely.
Okay, well then let's move on to Team Jedi, which I learned that Ms. Carissa is in charge of.
So I guess it's the worst kept secret or the best kept secret that I've been leading Team Jedi since September, October. So it came up last week. And so just wanted to share the process and overview as a partner to the work here at WDIC. One of the questions I always try to hit the things that we're trying to work on, the high level things. One, we're working on alignment of what the work of how Team Jedi will align with WDIC according to the county policy. So since Team Jedi started in August, and so it was developed based upon the GEAR core equity model. And so from there, we outlined the structure and purpose of the group. And then we're in the process of developing goals, and the goals will be to the group at the end of next month. And so if you don't mind me sharing the screen, I will share the document that Team Jedi members have seen, but then also a document that I've shared with Henry and Leslin as well, with the structure of Team Jedi and the work that we're doing. If you don't mind me sharing, Henry.
Nope, share away.
Sure. Okay. So Team Jedi, the vision statement was developed based by Team Jedi members to be Team Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion is an employee-led initiative driven by the shared values of respect, diversity, social justice, equity, striving to promote and model compassion in an inclusive environment. As agents of institutional change, we share in leading Tompkins County government into a future of inclusive excellence where all employees treat each other and the public respectfully without bias. That statement was created and adopted by Team Jedi several months ago. And so from there, we tried to, again, work to align the work with WDIC and the policy. So from there, Team Jedi has the following objectives, which are shared here as well, around inclusive excellence. And so then from there, based upon the climate survey, meeting with all the department heads through multiple forums, people in the community in terms of service delivery, looking at data, not just climate survey, looking at our demographic information, prior reports, feedback informally and externally, informally and formally, we developed these 5 core working groups, which include access and equity. It's around promoting equity within Team Jedi, and then also looking at barriers to resources and barriers to resources and services within the county. Then we have a communications group that their goals are to communicate the work of Team Jedi and other equity-related issues throughout the organization. We also have our data and analysis committee that the goal is to create a two-way feedback loop. And also the names underneath there are the chairs and vice chairs who've agreed to lead these working groups. We have a steering committee that we're still in the process of developing, which we're hoping will cross-pollinate with WDIC to make sure that the information is shared across both working groups. I guess committee to Team Jedi. We have a professional development, education, and training group that is actually will be working with Dr. Gonzalez directly to help do some training, some educational forums, and collaborate across the county. And again, we have the Recognition and Appreciation Committee, and their goal is to highlight the work of excellence in diversity, inclusion, and justice here at the county. And then here are some of the, we say our action items and some of the things in terms of our accountability that we say we would do. Specifically, we have it was called a shared working agreement, which is designed to make sure that we're accountable to each other. So making sure that we are communicating respectfully, transparently, how we share information if folks are missing or being involved or uninvolved. So that's some of the things that we've been doing. So essentially what we've done for the last several months was, one, they had to get to know each other. Team Jedi right now is comprised of 33 unique individuals from top to bottom, from left to right within the organization, people who didn't know each other. And a lot of folks, we had people asking questions of what is diversity to folks who are a part of some of the protesting groups, are some of the part of the movement. And so bringing all those different groups together to try to, one, create a cohesive structure. So that's where that comes from. So, and Rachel and Dr. Clark, feel free to jump in if you'd like, if that's a fair assessment of what's happened to date, or Kate or Ruby as well. Okay, so then from there, like I said, right now they're in their working groups, and they just started meeting last month for the first time, because again, we had to create the who, where, what, why, what are you doing, why are you doing it, again, and then also creating an environment where folks can feel like they're a part and get to know each other, because again, you can't do this work with each other if you don't have trust. And essentially there was no trust, not because people had done something, but because they didn't know each other, and they weren't comfortable in the spaces. So from there, they plan to begin to provide their goals, or their action, I shouldn't say goal, action items, the things they would like to accomplish in the next year or so, or a little less than that. And then I will bring those things back to WDIC. Also saying this work does not exist in a vacuum. We recognize that WDIC was a pre-existing committee here doing this work. And so I'm saying that from the perspective, how do we align this and what does that look like? It was a nice conversation with Henry and Rachel to have that discussion last week to discuss what that looks like and how Henry sees and Rachel see that work aligning with this group. So again, they've done a tremendous amount of work, and attended a couple conferences, attended a couple trainings. So this is where we are right now. And again, I'll bring those goals back. And then the goal will be in August, some time frame, when we celebrate their 1-year anniversary of being an organized group. They will do some type of town hall or something of that nature to share all the work out that they've been doing. And in the meantime, they will be, we have asked, and Jason said it was okay to join the town halls, to have some of those conversations, to be a part, to share out some of the information. One of the things that the professional development group is working on is how we use the GARE membership more strategically. We have this membership. I use it, some of the members of Jedi use it, but it's an organizational membership. So folks need to, if we're investing our money and resources, we need to share more what's happening and how, and identify what our return on investment is with GARE. So doing some of that work as well. And then and again, lots of data review, lots of analysis. One of the positives that I'd like to share that we had the other day was, I had been meeting with Jackie from the Workforce Development Board. Am I saying it right? Or Workforce something. Workforce, please help.
Career Center.
Career Center? Okay, thank you. And one of the things she'd been talking to me about was her work with forms and changing things of that nature. And so one of the things that was an awesome story that she was able to do is get her forms changed to revise the questions in terms of equity-based questions. And so instead of asking folks, are you a felon, things like that, how do you ask those questions in a way that are not alarming people? And so that's actually gone up through not just the state, but the national level. And so they're looking at changing those forms. And that also speaks to some of the work that we've talked about doing with work with pronouns as well. One of the things that I have on my to do, not just wish list, but is to look at all the county forms and how do we adopt a standard for looking at gender identity and things of that nature. So those are just some of the good things that have happened, and not just happening in Jackie's area, but also throughout the various working groups. But then lastly, how do we tell that story? And so I know Henry mentioned the other day talking about the website. So try to solicit some IT website support to get some things updated. So that's what's happening with Team Jedi. Again, Rachel, Ken, Kate, you guys are members. Please feel free to jump in, sell good, bad, ugly, whatever you like to share.
One of the things that I think has been good to see is that people have, really been consistent in their participation in Team Jedi. For the convening of such a large group around, challenging issues. It's been good to see the level of participation is not waned. And I know we're still early in the game yet, but that has been a positive sign in terms of people's participation, their interest, their intent to learn and to grow an understanding of what it means to, center equity in the workplace.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, well, thank you, Deanna, for the Team Jedi update. I'd like to now go to our new Human Resource Director, Ruby Pilliam, and she will give us an update on outstanding searches, is what's going on in her world.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Chair. You requested an update on the open searches. We're just going to do the primary one we're working on right now is the Director of the Department of Emergency Response. And we're working on that right now. Phone interviews will begin next week, the week of March 1st. In person via Zoom will begin the following week, March 8th and 9th. And we're hoping to have a wonderful candidate soon to present to you. Out of all, we reviewed 21 applications and we're going from there. We also have a senior planner opening. There are 2 positions that are opening. The deadline isn't until March 17th, so we're waiting to receive applications from there. And the library director search, the application period ended on the 15th of February. So far, we have 25 approved applications. The initial interviews will be held the week of March 29th, followed by final interviews the week of April 12th. And they are hoping to have that position filled by June 1st. And those are the primary searches that we have open right now. That's all we have. You had requested something regarding the data, but I just wanted to mention one thing during the process of getting data for the Reimagining Public Safety. We have data from various sources, from multiple sources. And so before we give you any concrete data, we're going to get together and basically make sure that we have the data that's being requested and the form that's being requested. And that's it from HR.
Thank you. Larry, do you have a question? You're on mute. You're still on mute, Larry.
Okay, related to the search for the emergency director, can you tell me if there is a question in the interview process that probes their knowledge of the needs of people with disabilities or existing health problems during a emergency situation, and how familiar they are with resources? Because I think that's a major aspect of the that's missing in most emergency preparedness work is the fact that people with disabilities and chronic health conditions are overlooked in emergency planning. So I think it would be important to put a question in the interview process that touches on their knowledge of and experience with resources aimed at people with disabilities.
Larry, I appreciate that, and we welcome your comment. If you want to shoot that question to me in an email, we'll make sure it's included.
I will. I just think it's really important. The Finger Lakes Independence Center has been doing work around emergency preparedness, and it would be good if we had a candidate coming in who has background with that particular issue. So I'll shoot you an email.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And you can, I'll just put some words on paper and you can do with them what you'd like.
Yes. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? Thank you, Ruby. Next is we're going to go to Reimagining Public Safety. And I'm not sure, but Deanna, I don't know whether you're doing it by yourself, but I see Jason here, I see other people. So the floor is yours.
Before we get started, I just wanted to welcome Dr. Sean Eversley Bradwell to our committee meeting. He was one of the researchers who, he and Dr. Gonzalez did all the data analysis of all the focus groups. And so I'll turn it over to Jason, who will be leading the presentation, but I wanted to recognize him as our guest and thank him for his service, along with a lot of folks who have spent a lot of time and effort on this work. Thank you.
Thanks, Deanna. Thank you, Henry. Good afternoon, everyone. I'll second that. There was a lot of people that spent an enormous amount of time in this collaborative effort, and Deanna, Dominic, Shelley, Michelle, Nunn, particularly those three individuals, really did a lot of heavy lifting in the last few weeks of this to bring it all together. So thank you for your commitment and hard work to it. So the report, it was released on Monday. It's 100+ pages, so it's okay if not everybody's read it by now. But what I can do now is go through a little bit of a summary of it, a presentation of it, and kind of go through quickly some of the recommendations, and then be happy to open up dialogue to everybody, ask questions about it. There are some recommendations that are specific to the city that I'm not best to answer, and I would defer that to the mayor, but I can definitely talk about some of the ones that are specific to the county and some of the ones that are collaborative, which is the majority of them, and then really gauge feedback. We have a lot of different feedback sessions lined up where we'll be talking to different subgroups in the community to gauge interest, thoughts, comments, so we can bring that back to the Tompkins County Legislature as well as the Common Council so they can make a decision as to what they want to adopt in the final report. So I'll share my screen if it's all right. And I'll go quickly through this. Everyone can see that. That is the just the beginning of the report. I want to stress this is a draft report. Draft meaning while there was a huge collaborative effort that went into this, it's a draft report in the sense that at the end of the day, from the county's perspective, the legislature has to adopt the report. So to the extent that there'll be amendments, changes, edits, additions, subtractions is still yet to come. And that's based on a lot of the feedback that we're able to provide and give them based on different community group meetings that we have, and then also based on any open sessions they have about the report and the feedback they receive from their constituents. So it's a draft report. A lot of people worked on this, both in the work groups, but also community input. And I'll safe to say, and I've said this before, and I'll continue to say it, not everyone that worked on this and part of the team is in agreement with all of the recommendations, and that's okay. This next step over the next 35 days is about identifying what the best path is moving forward for the community. So the background, I'm not going to get into too much of the process, but there was a lot of community feedback, different engagement, some specific over a dozen focus groups of subgroups within the community, a lot of open forums. and a lot of current evaluation of some of the data that was able to be pulled out of the current records management system, which is Spillman. That's the records management system that all our law enforcement agencies in the county input into. So that was involving a lot of the background process. Dominic, Shelley, Deanna played a huge role in, and the communications team in general played a huge role in engaging in a lot of different opportunities to engage and receive feedback from the public. We've color-coded these recommendations. A full blue dot is the city recommendation, a full green dot is the county recommendation, and then the blended blue and green dot, which is most of them, are collective recommendations. I think probably most of you are familiar with Executive Order 203. And Executive 203 really focused and centered on prioritizing and understanding discrimination and mistreatment of Black and African American citizens with respect to interactions with law enforcement. It was focused on Black and Brown members in the community, and that's really the lens we looked through a lot of the recommendations. Is this going to positively impact those members of our community? If so, this is something we should consider, and if not, this is not necessarily the venue to consider that. So I'll get into right now the recommendations. There's about 20 of them. I'll go through them briefly because I want to really turn it over to the group and ask questions and answer questions. And then we'll go from there. So the first recommendation, again, this is a city recommendation. It's probably received most of the press of the past few days, which is replace the City of Ithaca Police Department with the Community Solutions and Public Safety Department. Again, I don't know if that's really my place to talk a lot about this recommendation, other than at some point in time, if we want, we can invite the mayor to speak to it and talk a little bit more about it. The next one below that, better align available resources with emergency response needs by establishing a pilot program for non-emergency calls. This is an attempt to provide some resources, civilian resources, to the Sheriff's Department that will handle different types of non-emergent calls, mostly over the phone, report filing, different types of calls where typically law enforcement officers have been responding to, but don't necessarily need to, and they're not emergent. So this is a pilot program that's to hire 3 civilian staff that will help manage those mostly remotely. It wouldn't be in-person response, but this is a pilot program to see how that response is over the year, and does that with the intent of that it would free up armed officers for more urgent needs and responses versus then bogging down the response system. The next one to the right is probably the largest in terms of impact driven and probably spanning across the whole municipality recommendation. That's evaluate the existing models and implement an alternative to law enforcement response system for crisis intervention and wraparound health and human service delivery. So this is really identifying a model similar to a CAHOOTS model, which is originated in Eugene, Oregon, has been duplicated and mimicked in different ways across the country, on how we would have an alternative response to law enforcement, particularly around crisis intervention and other health and human service needs. This is meant, at times could supplant a law enforcement response, but most likely partnering and supporting the response and a co-response to these matters, and may also be able to provide longer and more impactful wraparound services after the initial response. This has a 12-month turnaround on it and is probably one of the more costly recommendations here, because we're talking about a county-wide model with respect to an alternative law enforcement response. This was a very common theme under the feedback that we received from constituents as to alternatives to law enforcement responses. Collaborative recommendations: identify new curriculum, redesign and implement a cultural responsive training program that incorporates de-escalation and mental health components into a comprehensive response for law enforcement. So this was tailored around creating a training program that would be both continued on an annual basis for law enforcement agencies, but also be a key training component for officers that are new to the department right after police academy, but prior to field training. So they have an understanding and expectation of our expectations before they hit the road in terms of different types of mental health components, de-escalation training, and so on and so forth. So this is really packaging and doing a training component before officers start with the field training, a part of their employment, which is usually following right after academy graduation. Develop a comprehensive, inclusive, and innovative recruitment strategy for law enforcement and correctional officers. This is really working with our two HR folks, Ruby and Shelley Michelle Nunn from the city, in developing a comprehensive approach to doing outreach, supporting our minority members in our community, to encourage them to apply for law enforcement and correctional officer positions, anywhere from navigating the civil service system to preparing for testing, and to really doing a focused and comprehensive outreach to ensuring we're casting the net to reaching all candidates and interested candidates in this line of work. Develop a comprehensive community healing plan to address trauma in the relationship between residents and law enforcement. I think one of the primary responses we received from the community was the breakdown in trust between law enforcement and community members. This is a focused approach to addressing some of the trauma between the two communities and really trying to build a trust and relationship between our residents and our law enforcement workers. Develop a countywide program to promote and support holistic officer wellness. We have a model peer-to-peer program with our probation department, if you're not familiar. It's actually been recognized by the New York State Association of Probation Officers. This started under Pat's leadership and has been continued under Dan's leadership. He's taken the role, and it's a peer-to-peer support system that trains officers, probation officers within the department to provide peer-to-peer support. That is a component of this for law enforcement officers, but also looking at full mental health of our law enforcement officers and ensuring that we have support and services for them, whether it's peer-to-peer or whether it's clinical or EAP services for them. Data-related recommendations, standardize data entry and review existing data sets for more actionable insights and allocation of public safety resources. So as we got into this process and started to look at the data over a 3 or 4 year period, data from Spillman, which is the records management system that officers enter information into based on responses, incidents, so on and so forth. What we found is that there was not a standardized way to do it across agencies, which was problematic because it did not allow for easy comparisons of data. And what we found is that it was incomplete at times. So essentially, put in this way, bad data put into a system is going to result in bad data coming out of the system. And it does not allow for good analysis, good analytics, good understanding, which can ultimately lead to better decision-making in the field. So standardizing the data entry process is something that needs to happen across all law enforcement agencies in the county. And that continued communication and training of the system itself so it can be maximized, and of new officers when they come into the field and into this line of work in our community are trained adequately so they can enter in the system and the data consistently. Again, the data going into the system, the quality of it is going to determine the quality of it coming out of it. Develop real-time public safety communication dashboard. This is something we heard a lot about with respect to wanting to have more transparent information on police response, on different type of data relating to different geographic areas. So a lot of communities across the country have sometimes they're real-time dashboards or relatively real-time dashboards that provide some limited information that isn't personal or confidential about types of responses. And there's usually GIS interactive tools, so geographic information tools that you can overlay types of instances, locations, and you can do different queries to understand the types of responses, where the responses are, and timeframes of those responses across the community. So this dashboard directly would link to the data. And if it's not good data, you're not going to get a good dashboard out of it. And that's part of a public transparency perspective as well. There's also other things that can be put out there in terms of grouping of types of responses and different modules that are actually part of the system that can be very helpful for being transparent with types of law enforcement activity. The next one below that, collect and evaluate the results of officer-initiated traffic stop enforcement. That is a county recommendation. Right now, we do not collect demographic information related to traffic stops. And traffic stops generally is probably the most common interaction that the public would have with law enforcement. It's also very commonly that there's a disproportionate impact on minorities with respect to traffic stops. We don't have that information. That's information we should start to gather. We should also understand that a large portion of traffic stops result in warnings, and even more in a good portion, more than half of the tickets that are issued are fully dismissed. So we don't have demographic information on who's getting warnings and who's getting tickets and who's getting dismissed. This initiative is about collecting that demographic data analyzing it. Is it an effective practice? And if it's not, how can it be effective, or should we continue that practice of traffic stops? SWAT-related recommendations. This has drawn some attention. Currently, the SWAT vehicle is owned by the Ithaca Police Department and the City of Ithaca. It's primarily dedicated and solely dedicated to SWAT operations. So the SWAT vehicle itself is a mobile command center. It has a certain level of communication capability. It is not an armored personnel carrier, so it doesn't have ballistic protections and so on and so forth. And really, the recommendation with this is to transfer that vehicle to the County Department of Emergency Response, which provides emergency response services to the entire county. Because this is a mobile command center that can be used for a variety of activities. For example, doing COVID testing and COVID vaccines on a mobile basis. This is a vehicle that could be used for that. If we had an incident like we did, I was not here for the incident, but the incident at Cargill where there was miners trapped in a shaft, this could be a mobile command center that can be deployed. It allows folks to gather inside, be out of the elements, plan, so on and so forth. So a mobile command center is a very common asset and resource in a lot of communities. Being able to uplift it to our county department to do so allows that asset to be spread out for more purposes other than just law enforcement. Conduct a review of SWAT callouts to determine the appropriate use of service and equipment. This is really looking back over the past 3 years of SWAT callouts and trying to do some after action review to determine, was the callout appropriate? Was it too much resources that were put towards it? Was it not enough resources put towards it? And what are the type of resources we need to move forward when we talk about some specialized security details or specialized security forces like a SWAT team? Advocacy recommendation, seek ongoing responsiveness. So a lot of this is New York State partnership, a collaboration from New York State troopers and operating in our county. So really, New York State troopers have jurisdiction over the whole county, they have jurisdiction over the whole state. We want to ensure that they're going to participate and agree to operate as we do with our expectations in our community. A lot of this is going to involve just not only reaching out to New York State and saying, hey, we want you to partner with us in the way we operate in our community, but it's also involving them in a lot of these conversations. So whether it's anywhere from the data review, we want to engage them in that data review so they know what our expectation is in operating in our community. Revise the civil service exam process and the continuous recruitment one. This has to do with changes at the state level that will aid in the recruitment and hiring of law enforcement officers in the future. This is challenges that we have in the hiring and recruitment process that if they were changed, we think it would make it easier to open up to a greater spectrum of candidates. The last one there is urging the state to change its disciplinary procedures for law enforcement personnel under Civil Service Law Section 75. That is the law that dictates disciplinary procedures, which many times is dragged out and prevents us from having expeditious disciplinary processes when it comes to law enforcement officers. Accountability recommendations. One recommendation that the city is asking for is that their community police board have more oversight and authority. So right now they provide advisory recommendations. What Ithaca is asking for is that the board be granted subpoena and disciplinary authority over officers. I'm not sure, but that may require some state action or intervention. Create a Tompkins County Police Safety Public Safety Review Board. This is actually entertaining the thought of creating a similar oversight, or what I would call resident oversight board for the county sheriff's department. We don't have one, and we received a lot of feedback about accountability from members of the community, and this is a point of discussion that should take place if we want that type of public safety review board at the county level. The bottom there, require public disclosure of district attorney and assigned counsel office statistics. So a lot of this has been focused on the law enforcement agency, but not on necessarily the prosecutorial end of things. We think providing demographic and outcome metrics from the district attorney, which is the prosecutorial end of things, and from the public defender side of things, which is the assigned counsel office, would help benefit to get a bigger picture and understanding of how the two offices are performing. We've actually recommended also that our CGATI committee partner in this initiative and help be a sounding board as to what metrics would be helpful to report on a regular basis. Lastly is the implementation recommendation. which is create a community justice center with new staff and resources made available to follow through on the recommendations and engage community members. So this community, Tompkins County has, I think, and maybe this is bias, has probably had the best COVID-19 response of any county in the state. We have the lowest infection rate. We have one of the highest vaccination rates. We set up a vaccination center before any state site was set up. And to this day, we get more vaccine than some of the largest counties twice our size in our region. And that's because we put and invested in the human resources to combat this pandemic. And we did it in a way that that had the availability and the resources behind it. And if we want to address this pandemic with respect to reforming law enforcement, we need to put forward the same type of resources and commitment to it. And really what this is asking for is for the hiring of a few positions to commit the time to dedicate the resources to engage with community members, facilitate and manage different initiatives across multiple jurisdictions, multiple departments, and multiple NGOs and agencies in the community, putting those resources to seeing this through, and at least in the initial phases, kicking off those recommendations, which will ultimately change and enhance and improve as we go down this path in the next months and years to come. And that's kind of really where I think the rubber meets the road with this recommendation and this plan, is that this is putting the right support behind it to see it follow through. What's next? Community input, feedback, recommendations have to be considered by the legislative bodies, changes, edits, subtractions, additions. This is a living document. So while April 1st is the deadline for this, I suspect and would say that this will continue to change over time as we move into some recommendations and move into new ones and branch out and continue to evolve. And the implementation process obviously is a community justice center with more community engagement. So that's that's a very, very brief version of the 100-page plan. A lot of work has gone into it. A lot of different proposals. And more to come, I would imagine, and more vetting of these proposals and recommendations. And hopefully over the next 35 days, we'll get some good feedback, and the legislature and the city council will have their ability to adopt a plan that they want to move forward. So, I'll leave. Deanna, I don't know if you have anything to add. I'd be happy to open it up. And I know Dom, I think Dom's off the phone. Deanna and Dom, very committed a lot of time and energy to bring this together. And if I missed anything, please add it before we open up the floor.
Just wanted to note that we also, I'll put in the link in the chat, that we also have an online form that Dominic's put together for folks who may not want to express their opinion here, but also online, but then also that we have a town hall tomorrow night at 6:30. So that's all I was going to share.
Okay, well, we open up the floor for questions. I'm sure you all read the report. Well, I have a question. I know that some people, when the governor announced the executive order, called this a unfunded mandate. And I noticed that many of the things you suggest all have price tags to them. Will you be adding price tags to the report on April 1st, or is it just going to be ideas and that's it?
I think that's going to evolve over the next few weeks, Henry. I think so I wouldn't characterize it as an unfunded mandate. I think a community has to make its choice to want to make these changes, and if it does, then it's not an unfunded mandate in my mind, in my perspective. But we went back and forth internally of, do we spend that effort now, or do we kind of develop that over the next few weeks, which I think will be an inevitable, particularly over the next few weeks. So there's an understanding of some of the initial investment, and some of it we won't be able to put a price, a cost to, because it'll evolve. But I think it's inevitable that before the report is adopted, you're going to want to know some of the costs, at least the preliminary costs of these things.
Okay. I also heard that that the governor allegedly is not going to look at the reports in substance, that he's just going to collect the reports and then magically turn it back on the entities. Do you know any idea what the governor's going to do with the reports?
I don't know what the governor's going to do, but I can tell you that I've brought this up multiple times. I'm sorry. I brought this up multiple times through the New York Association of Counties. I didn't get much audience, but I'll continue to push it, saying that, number one, I was kind of disappointed that the governor's budget, which is usually his venue and platform to put new things out, and he uses that as a platform. There was nothing in the governor's budget this year that really addressed or tried to make way for substantial change in this arena. So it was somewhat disappointing that the executive order was issued in June, but nothing in his budget process really addressed some changes, which I think have to happen at the state level. So I'll continue to advocate that with our New York Association of Counties. The other side to this is that some of this is going to be advocacy on our part with the state. I have read some of the reports across the state. A lot of them are not very comprehensive. There are some that are similar in terms of action, asking for action at the state level. So, for example, City of Rochester has a very comprehensive one. They've asked for some similar changes from the state, from the civil service side of things. So there will be some. There will have to be some lobbying effort on our part to encourage this to happen, and I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that the state and the governor will focus on this come the next few months to identify that we can't. Some of this change, we need partnership from the state to make it substantial and substantive, and without that, it's going to be a hindrance for municipalities to make some substantive change. So I'm hopeful that that will change, and I hope that these reports are not just glanced over. And I mean, the governor has attached state funding to it, so I would hope that they have a cadre of folks reviewing them. And if folks are just gun decking it, which some of them are, they're not putting a lot of effort into it, they send it back to them and say, do a better job. That would be my hope. I don't know that that's going to be the case, but that would be my hope.
Okay.
If I could offer a couple of reactions there.
Sure.
I think that our work these past few years with WDIC's own law enforcement subcommittee actually puts our county in very good stead, because we have collective practice with really knuckling into some difficult issues and coming to understand what we can do within the authorities that we already possess and which require action by the state. And I think we can use that practice to serve our community well moving forward. I really, big surprise to everyone here, I'm sure, I really like the ideas of repurposing things like the Mobile Command Center more broadly to make it a more clearly community resource rather than a seeming paramilitary one. I like the idea of further pursuing a county level advisory board and possibly tying that with a proposed new justice office in a similar way to how the Human Rights Commission relates to the Office of Human Rights or some other similar structure. I definitely hope that we could form some coalitions with some of the other communities that have made similar recommendations to the state and exercise discipline in our lobbying. And I'd be happy to help be a shrill voice as a part of that.
Great. Thanks, Rob. Rob, you touched on some great points of what the community's already achieved. And I'll say this, some of the initiatives that we're requesting the state to change doesn't mean that if it doesn't, we're going to be prohibited from doing anything, or we're not going to be able to advance. We'll continue to advance these initiatives. It would be helpful for some of these changes at the state level, but that hasn't stopped us in the past, and it won't stop us in the future. Leslie, did you have a question? I saw your hand up.
Good.
I can go ahead, Henry?
Yes, you can.
I'm sorry.
Okay. Thank you. I have maybe about 102 questions, but I'll try and keep it to one. So Jason, if I heard you correctly, and if I understand the process right, this is, the governor asked us for a plan. This is a plan. None of these things is being implemented right now. Is that correct?
Correct.
So there will be there's going to be a phase where we talk through this some more, engage larger community more in figuring out some of these recommendations and potentially more. Correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay, and then my final question is, in terms of the process going in and informing this. Can any of you who were involved say off the top of your head how involved was the community of color, and particularly the Black community, in giving feedback, sharing experiences, whatever it is we were asking for? Did we reach a good subset of the Black community?
Yes, I would say so. And Sean, this speaks to, I believe, the focus groups, some of the work. And so if you want me to, I can pivot to you so you can talk about the focus group work and how those groups were identified and worked through.
So Leslie, that's a great question. And that sort of speaks to my involvement with the process along with Dr. Gonzalez, that there were a total of 21 focus groups, 15 different subcategories, if you would, of the community. We were very attentive to the fact that as we read Executive Order 203, there was a call to ensure that communities, for lack of a better word, oversample historically marginalized communities. So that's in fact what we did. So the work that Dr. Gonzalez and I did was hold multiple focus groups with the Asian American community, the Asian and Asian American community, with returning citizens, with people experiencing housing insecurity, multiple focus groups with the Black community, including youth of color. I want to say 3 focus groups with the Latinx community, including a focus group with multiple focus groups with the Latinx community as well. And so what we tried to do is capture in our section is the recommendations that came from those communities. It was not recommendations from Dr. Gonzalez and I, it was using qualitative research methods to make sure that those recommendations rose to the foreground and were highlighted and then provided to help influence the larger report.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
And if I could, my apologies, and Leslie, if I can answer the question behind the question, is there room for additional feedback? Absolutely.
You know me too well, Sean.
And the number one response that we gave, and both Jason and Deanna have heard this most, and it was reflected in the report that we wrote, was a significant skepticism regarding the process in general and participation. And as you know, folks trying to lend my own personal relationships, people saying to me, no, like I've been down this path before. And the real question becomes from the report to implementation, which I think you asked as well. So that feedback was communicated loud and clear, and Jason and Deanna heard it and did a great job of, I think, capturing that in the full report as well.
Thank you.
Thanks. And also just to kind of, I could just respond to Leslie's, it's not just, well, in addition to the report, the next step is while we have a town hall tomorrow, we're scheduling a couple of, I hate to use the term BIPOC. We've had this controversial debate about the term BIPOC, forums for people of color. And so that we're targeting. When we met with you I think it was a couple of weeks ago, to identify some folks, I've reached out to a couple of those places, and we're trying to have something with Southside Center, and we'll be looking at other forums. Part of the delay, a little bit of the delay, is trying to get the report out and then schedule some of these things. But we also have worked contacted Calvary Baptist, and several other churches to do a religious, not really religious forum, but a forum with folks who attend church or want to be in a religious space on March 18th. And then also we're speaking with folks internally and externally. So just like we did this work to solicit, to get to these recommendations, we need to do the same work the opposite direction. In addition, we're also working with the Veterans Services here at Tompkins County, and we'll be doing a forum with them, just like we did pre-report as well. And so all of those groups, we're trying to identify a way to get back to them. It may not be in the targeted focus group way because of the timing of it. At the same time, going back to those same folks to get feedback. And then in addition to that, there's a lot of pushback in terms of folks who will say, well, what about law enforcement? We get that as well. So one of the things we've also proposed as well is going back to those spaces in terms of law enforcement. And I've spoken with Michelle Nunn as well, seeing how we can speak with IPD. I've talked to Jason as well about how we can have forums here specifically at Tompkins County with some of those folks Team Jedi specifically, part of their work is to be talking about equity and inclusion in addition to this space. We're having a forum specifically for them. We recognize that the deputies and the police officers are also employees here, but then also, again, trying to be laser focused that this Executive Order 203 is targeting disproportionate impact of minoritized communities.
Okay, Ann Coleman is impatiently waiting.
Thank you. So some of my questions have been answered, but one that I still have is, you talked about how this is going to be county-wide, and I know that this has been worked on with the city of Ithaca. How about, and maybe I missed this, with the other municipal law enforcement agencies that we have within the county and the state, to make sure that everybody's on the same page?
It's a good question, and I have not reviewed any of the other reports if they're out from some of the other communities yet. But I think much, if not most, if not all of the collaborative initiatives in this report would involve their participation, and in some way or form would have them involved or engaged, at least be at the table. So, for example, if I take the data issues, and their involvement is going to be important because they're inputting into the same system that we all are. The training opportunities, I think, I know the sheriff and the undersheriff have done a good job. When they offer training, they open it up to all the law enforcement agencies in the community. So if we have a training module that we want to execute and we want to go about it a certain way, if it's possible, opening it up to the other agencies is something that can easily be done. So I think, I think there's a lot of opportunity to engage with them, and most of these recommendations, I don't see that they can't be implemented in one form or fashion, either in partnership with those communities or in those communities.
So I guess part of what I'm thinking about is also, consistency. That so if somebody, for instance, Trumansburg Police is developing their own draft policy, and so if somebody should call the Trumansburg Police, who is not staffed 24 hours a day, should they be afraid to call in the evening because they don't know, for instance, which organization might be answering a call, and or if police departments, or public safety, different agencies, because they might be called different things now going forward, when they're called to help out, are they going to all be on the same page and maybe using the same technique?
Yeah, one of the things I think that's going to be a countywide discussion piece is this alternative response that it's going to be very difficult if one community didn't want to participate. I don't think that's really a practical outcome, to be honest with you. And I think that'll work. I think it will fall into place because I think all agencies are going to be interested in understanding how alternative responses can be incorporated into their operating procedures and how they can respond both in support as co-responders. I think that will fall into place, and it only makes sense that it's on a countywide basis. We can't pick and choose, the jurisdictional boundaries on this type of response.
Right. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for your report. And I assume that if you I assume you put up the feedback link on this website in the chat room, and so anybody can get back to you any way they can. But again, Deanna?
Two more people have their hands up, Deanna and Leslyn.
Well, really, I was waving because Leslyn had her hand up, so I didn't know if you could see Leslyn, so I started waving.
Okay, Leslyn.
This is just a quick follow-up to what Annie was asking. So Jason, when we first started this process, we had all of the municipal law enforcement, top folks and elected officials at the table. So is it, from what I'm hearing, is it that they're all now doing their own reports to go to the state?
They have to. They have to adopt their own plans. Every any elected body that has a police department has to adopt their own plan.
Okay, I think I asked that the wrong way.
Okay, sorry.
So are they, were they still involved with this process that we did, and are they submitting something that's similar to what we have now with whatever nuances for their own?
So a lot of, I'm sorry. Yes. So we have been in contact with them to offer support and help them with it in any way possible, in addition to what we've been doing. I think the feedback and the information that we got through our process can be applicable across the county. And that's kind of one of the challenges and part of the reason we did a collaborative with the city, because if we're all going to do a public engagement process, we're engaging the same constituents multiple times. So that's why we did the two largest entities of the city and the county, and any of the information that we have, we think can be applicable across the county. And so I know a few weeks ago, it's probably been a few weeks, probably a month or two ago now, Deanna, Dom, and I reached out to all the mayors and said, hey, we're willing to meet with you, talk about where we are in our process, help you through your process. We did provide some support, I think, to Dryden as they went through their process and added a little bit more of their local interest to it. And so we've been a resource to them. But at the end of the day, I think the information in our report is applicable countywide, not just, and we serve the whole county. We serve those jurisdictions from the sheriff's perspective. But they do have to adopt their own report. They do have to adopt their own plan, and they're more than willing, and we're more than willing to, they can use any parts of our plan as well to add and to support their initiative.
I just wanted to add to that. I met with the police chief of Cayuga Heights. We met with the town of Dryden as well. Folks in the send any documents that we had that we use for public engagement, we shared with them. They asked about the process facilitation. So, and then even Jason made Dominic and I available to provide technical support as needed. And then Henry found a great resource of the Albany Law School, the repository of all of the plans that have been submitted to date. So we shared it with them as well. And so any questions they've asked, we offer to provide support and assistance. But then a lot of the balance has been, some of the folks are like, well, we're not as big, so we're not going to be doing as much as that. So we tried to meet them where they were to answer any questions, and kind of been on call whenever they needed support. And then some of them just said, we have it under control. So
okay, last question from Larry.
So it's not so much a question as a comment. First, I want to thank Jason for being willing to come and talk to and being interested in coming to talk to the Community Services Board. You're coming again at our next meeting. It's becoming clear to me that we may need in the final plans something that addresses a variety of disability questions specifically, not in an index, but in an actual part of the plan, because it's easy for people to say, we think X should do this and Y should do that, but there are specific kinds of things that police officers can do and that human service workers can do. And we need to be clear about what that is in the disability context, in mental health, in substance abuse, and in developmental disabilities. Because if you look at the stories of the tragedies that have occurred because of police inability or because of sometimes police malfeasance, a lot of, along with race, disability is clearly implicated in the reason, and lack of disability knowledge is clearly implicated in some of the tragedies that we're all keeping in the forefront of our minds. So I think I'm beginning to think that when the final report comes out, what will need to happen is some stuff that directly and forthrightly talks about the ways in which people with disabilities interact with law enforcement.
That's a very good point, Larry. And I know how to get a hold of you, and we can maybe follow up afterwards on some thoughts that you have a little bit more around that. It's a good point. It's a good point we should point out in the report.
Okay, Mr. Bradswell.
I'll just be quick. Larry, just to let you know that we had a focus group with folks with disabilities as well, so it informed our report for the very reasons that you identified.
Okay, again, thank you.
I would respond back. I think I was part of that focus group. I think we need
I think you were.
Need to do more focus groups.
Sure.
But we'll take it from where we are.
Thank you. Remember, the feedback line is in the chat. Now we're going to quickly move on to the 2021 goals. I'm going to try to bring it up. Okay, I cannot bring it up. Can Kathy or Brittany, can you share your screens with the goals?
Not sure if I have them.
Okay, well, I can.
Let me see.
Henry, if I may, I just got these just a little bit ago. I hadn't seen the email and really haven't had a chance to look through and figure out what's going on. I know you're eager to get them going at this point, but I don't know how others feel. We don't have a lot of time left.
Okay, why don't we, our next meeting is April 28th. Why don't you review the goals and send me any comments by email that you can, and then we'll be ready on April 28th to dig into them and set them quickly. And so we can do that, but now we can basically do announcements. So you put an announcement in the chat about the Black History Month at GIAC. So why don't we just do that?
And Henry, can I say one thing quick about the goals?
Sure.
Since we're not meeting for 2 more months, we don't, if people are okay, I don't know if we need to vote on them, but you and I have had a discussion. If other people can, look at them, can we either have discussions or finish it by email so it doesn't have to wait till April?
Sure. Why don't people email me the next week or so, and then I will, maybe do a revised draft, and then we can go forward from there with some of the goals. Because many of the goals are the goals from 2019, 2020. And so they're not new and exciting. They've been goals of this organization for a while. And so again, why don't you just look at them, really just focus on the new, basically maybe some new goals that we might adopt. But again, we have lots of old goals that are on the table. Okay.
May I ask a follow-up, Henry? Because then I need to know what to do. So the thing says new goals, and it says budget, use funds wisely.
Right.
I'm not sure I understand what that, and then there were just words down.
Yeah.
So are we creating goals out of these things? Is that what you're looking for feedback?
Yeah, I'm looking. Well, yeah, we have under the budget that I didn't know we had, that we're just thinking of things that maybe we can fund, that we can like I said, the monthly history events, that maybe we can bring in a speaker for those events. Maybe we can do something else that would maybe cost a little bit of money, but again, we could spend the money on. Or if we want to possibly hold a co-sponsor an event with someone else, we can use the funding for that. Again, it's just basically some ideas of what we want to use our budget on, and just to see what we're doing with what we can do with our funding.
Okay, I guess I'll ask you my question. I'm not going to hold up time.
Okay. So let's go around. Anyone has any announcements?
So I did put in the chat real quickly. I think one of the first links I put in the chat was a link to register for the annual Black History Month challenge show, which is this Friday. So that's the first thing in the chat. Please register if you'd like to attend the event. Thank you. And on March 1st is Cornell's Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. commemorative lecture event with author Ijoma Lua, who is the author of So You Want to Talk About Race and Mediocre. And it's at 7 p.m. virtual. Please do join in the conversation.
Any other announcements? Well, Ken, why don't you repeat the announcement for your program for tomorrow? You're on mute.
Okay, I'm sorry, say again?
Why don't you repeat the announcement for your program? Oh.
Okay, it will be held at 12. In fact, I'm gonna put the YouTube address in the chat box in a second here. It's called African Americans, Death Gap and Health Equity, One Doctor's Perspective, featuring Dr. David Ansel, Rush University Medical School, Chicago. Sponsored by OHR, the Chief Equity Diversity Officer, and by 2 departments of Ithaca College, including health and physical education. I'll put all that in the chat shortly.
Okay, thank you.
Also,
Deanna?
just one quick announcement, and we were partnering with Cornell and Ithaca College and the city of Ithaca to do a BIPOC virtual networking event on Tuesday the 2nd from 5 to 6. And so apologies again that it's on the day of a legislative meeting. It was an unintended oversight, I will say it that way. And so we will make sure we do that follow up on schedules in the future, but then it's 1 hour, and then we'll take that feedback back to the local leaders of color group, and they'll determine how they want to move forward. But it was something that just came up, and so Cornell was asked to lead and needed some support. And so we've worked with folks who've done it before, I guess in person in the past, to do some of the work. And we'd like to thank Cornell and their workforce diversity and inclusion group for doing the heavy lifting on that.
Where can they find the link to that?
I will put the link in here if you'd like me to. And also it's in the flyer that I shared with you. It's
right, but but people who don't have access to the flyer, how can they find out?
I can ask it's on the Cornell, I believe, website. So I'll check with them and their affinity groups. The flyer was all that I received.
Anyone else have something? Okay, well.
Henry, I just wanted to acknowledge the Black man who was walking across the street and wound up in an altercation with police and was shot and died. So I just wanted to acknowledge that, and another tragedy in the community.
Yes, and those Rochester police who killed Mr. Prudy did not get charged by the grand jury.
And can I ask which person and which city you're referring to?
I actually don't remember the details. I just saw it briefly on a couple of news items. I don't know if anybody remembers it. It was a person walking across the street that the 2 officers were one of the officers accused him of jaywalking. Does anybody know the details?
His name is Elijah McLean.
Yes.
I did put him in my on Facebook, and it's in Colorado. Aurora, Colorado, right, is where this occurred. And I will tell you all that my mental health is going downhill fast every time one of these things happen. As a mother of Black sons who are at around that age, it scares me half to death. And this is just beyond anything that anyone could be continuing to go through. So thank you, Annie, for raising it. I always feel that when it makes a huge difference. I'm sorry I'm occupying your time. And I always feel like it has to be, usually it's my Black voice and me who's raising the issue. And so I really do appreciate you raising that issue and giving space and ear to it. So it doesn't always have to come from me. So thank you, or from Henry or Deanna or Dr. Clark. So thank you very much for that, or any of the people of color. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Leslie. Well, Deanna?
I have a question, but can we take a moment? I think we need to sit here. That wasn't just something you walk past, like, I know it's 5:03. I don't know if we need to get off, but.
Yes, I think let's have a moment of silence.
Ashe.
Ashe.
Okay. We'll meet on April 28th, but again, email me your comments to the 2021 goals. Thank you.
Thank you, Henry.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Good talking to everyone.
Likewise.